Her dad called her useless daughter in front of 200 guests at his $2 million anniversary party, and for a moment, everything around her froze. The chandeliers sparkled, soft music floated in the air, but all she could hear were his words. The sting of them hit her chest like a punch. Her younger half-brother, Darian, stood nearby, smirking as if this moment had been planned for him. Everyone else laughed politely, thinking it was a joke. But she knew the truth. She had been invisible for years, working tirelessly behind the scenes to keep the company running smoothly, fixing problems no one noticed, building systems that kept the whole operation alive. And tonight, she was reduced to a single word: useless. She had come hoping for acknowledgement, maybe even a small sign that her father saw her for more than what he wanted her to be. Instead, she felt smaller than ever. But in that moment, something inside her shifted. A quiet fire ignited. She realized that her silence had been her power all along, and tonight, that power would be revealed. She took a slow, steadying breath, reminding herself of the truth she had carried for years. She was not powerless. She was not invisible. She had something her father could never take from her, a secret he could never imagine. Her late grandfather had entrusted her with 31% of the company. 31%. Enough to control major decisions, enough to protect the company from mismanagement. She had kept it hidden, letting him believe he ruled unchallenged, hoping one day he might recognize her worth. That day had arrived. She scanned the glittering room. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the elegant decorations, they all felt distant. Her mind sharpened. She felt calm, focused, ready. She could see Darian's smirk falter ever so slightly, though he didn't know why. She knew what she had to do. Soon she would step forward, take the microphone, and reveal the truth. No more shadows. No more useless daughter. Tonight, she would reclaim what was rightfully hers. She imagined the faces of everyone here as they realized the quiet, invisible daughter they had dismissed actually held the power. She had prepared for this quietly, meticulously, and now the moment had come. Tonight she rises. Tonight she takes her place. And finally, the daughter they had all overlooked would show them exactly what she was capable of. She remembered the day her mother left like it was yesterday. Marissa Hale couldn't stay with her father anymore. His harsh words, his temper, and the endless pressure had broken her mother. Liana was young, but she felt the emptiness her mother left behind. She stayed because her father promised her something. He said she would inherit a real role in the company one day. She had wanted to believe him, and for a long time she did. But life with her younger half-brother, Darian, made it hard to forget. He was treated like a prince. Everything he wanted, he got. People smiled at him, praised him, and made him feel important. Liana, on the other hand, was left with the difficult work no one noticed. She handled staff problems, reorganized failing departments, and kept the company running smoothly. She worked quietly, hoping that one day her father would finally see her. Slowly, though, she realized he never intended to. She noticed him giving promotions, public praise, and leadership opportunities to Darian. The work she did, the systems she had built, the problems she had solved, went unnoticed. Every time she looked around, she felt invisible. The disappointment hurt more than she expected. Then came the final betrayal. She discovered paperwork filed by her father that demoted her from responsibilities she had managed for years. He assumed she would never see the documents, never realized that he had quietly taken away what she had earned. She stared at the papers, her hands shaking, her heart heavy. For the first time, she saw clearly that he had never intended to keep his promises. At first, she felt the sharp sting of anger and hurt. She wanted to scream, to cry, to confront him. But then she remembered something important. She had her own power. She had spent years learning, planning, and quietly preparing a path he could never control. The betrayal didn't break her. It sharpened her. She began moving her plan forward. Slowly, carefully, she set the pieces in place. She reminded herself that she didn't need his approval, his recognition, or his permission. Every action she took, every choice she made, was part of the goal she had been quietly preparing for years. The heartbreak made her stronger. The betrayal made her focused and clear about what she needed to do. By the time she stepped back and looked at everything she had built, she knew she could finally take control. She didn't need to confront him with anger or shouting. The work she had done, the knowledge she had gained, and the quiet strength she had nurtured were enough. The betrayal had opened her eyes, and she would use it to claim what was rightfully hers. She had always known she had something her father didn't. Something he could never take from her, something he would never see coming. Her late grandfather, Edmund Merrick, had trusted her when he never trusted Corbin. He had left her a part of the company, 31%, a stake large enough to control major decisions if she chose to use it. For years, she had kept it hidden. She watched as Corbin took credit for everything, as Darian gained recognition and power, and as her own work was ignored. She could have revealed the shares at any time, but she had waited. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that one day her father would see her worth on his own, that he would acknowledge all she had done. But that day never came. The documents had been carefully hidden, filed in a secure place that only she and Sylvan Creighton, her grandfather's lawyer, knew about. Sylvan had warned her once, long ago, that she should only use the shares if her father ever tried to erase her future. Liana had listened and waited. She had kept her plans quiet, careful, and precise. Every day, she watched and learned, building her knowledge and keeping track of the company's systems, the ones she had created to keep everything running. She remembered the day she first understood the full extent of what she held. 31%. Enough to block Corbin's decisions. Enough to protect the company and her own future. She felt a quiet thrill at the thought, a fire she had held back for years. It was power she had earned through her work, though Corbin believed she was invisible. No one had suspected. Not the executives, not the board, not Darian. Even Corbin, arrogant and blind, had no idea that she could override his choices, control the meetings, or take the company into her own hands. He thought she was just another shadow in the background, quiet and compliant. But she had been planning this moment, slowly and carefully, for years. She thought of Sylvan's words again. Only use the shares if he ever tried to erase her. She had proof of everything, contracts, ownership papers, legal rights. She had prepared herself for this moment, and now it had finally arrived. She felt steady, focused, and ready. She didn't need to argue, threaten, or fight. The power was already hers. For the first time in years, she felt completely in control. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the years of being ignored, they had all led to this. She could act calmly, strategically, and decisively. Corbin would not see it coming. Darian would not see it coming. And she would finally be recognized, not as the useless daughter, but as the one who held real power, the one who had quietly built her path to success. She allowed herself a small smile. It was time. The moment she had been waiting for all her life was here. She would no longer hide. She would no longer be invisible. She would step forward and claim what was rightfully hers. The party was in full swing when her father mocked her in front of everyone. Guests whispered quietly, glancing at her with curiosity and surprise. Darian snickered beside him, clearly enjoying the moment. Liana felt the sting, but she stayed calm. She had planned this carefully, and now was the time to act. She stepped onto the stage, moving slowly and confidently. The music dimmed slightly, and all eyes turned to her. She asked for the microphone in a clear, steady voice. Corbin laughed, thinking she was interrupting him. He didn't take her seriously, not for a second. But Liana didn't hesitate. She took a deep breath and began speaking, her voice calm but firm. She told the guests about her work in the company, about the system she had built, and how she had kept everything running smoothly. Her words were quiet but carried weight. People started to pay closer attention. Then she revealed the most important truth. She told them she owned 31% of the company, a stake that gave her real control. The words hung in the air. The room went silent. Guests froze, staring at her in shock. No one had expected this. Corbin's smile faltered, and even Darian looked stunned. Liana explained that she was exercising her rights immediately. She made it clear that she would now have authority over major decisions and that her control was legal and binding. Her voice was steady, and she didn't let the reactions of anyone in the room distract her. She had waited for this moment for years, and now she had it. Guests whispered among themselves, their surprise turning into murmurs of admiration. Some looked at Corbin with disbelief, realizing that everything he had claimed about the company's leadership was now being challenged openly. Darian tried to recover, but Liana didn't give him a chance. She kept her focus on the microphone and on the room, letting the truth settle in. Corbin tried to speak, but Liana held up her hand and continued. She didn't raise her voice or shout. She simply stated the facts, showing everyone that she had the power and that she was using it. The control she had kept hidden for so long was now out in the open, and no one could ignore it. By the time she finished, the room was completely silent. Every guest understood that something had shifted. Liana didn't need applause or cheers. She didn't need anyone to recognize her. The law and her grandfather's trust gave her everything she needed. The control she had quietly held for years was now undeniable. For the first time, she felt the power she had always deserved. The whispers, the shock, and the frozen faces of everyone in the room confirmed what she already knew. She was no longer invisible, and she was finally in control. The room was quiet, but the tension was heavy. Investors whispered urgently to each other, clearly upset. Liana watched as several of them approached Corbin, questioning him sharply. They were angry. He had misrepresented the company's structure, and now the truth was out in the open. Darian stepped forward, trying to regain some control. He sneered at Liana, attempting to insult her in front of the guests. But she was ready. Calmly, she pulled out documents she had prepared, showing clear evidence of Darian's fraud and mismanagement. The proof was undeniable. Guests gasped quietly as they read the papers. Darian's smirk disappeared, replaced with surprise and anger. Corbin's face turned red. He moved toward her, clearly trying to remove her from the stage. Liana held her ground. The security guards, who were hired by the venue and had been briefed on her legal authority, stepped in and blocked him. Corbin froze, realizing he could not act without consequences. Liana looked around the room and felt a sense of calm. She addressed everyone, her voice steady and clear. She declared that there would be an emergency shareholder meeting the next morning. Everyone needed to know the full truth, she said, and all decisions about the company would be reviewed immediately. Her tone left no room for argument. The guests murmured among themselves, impressed by her composure. Investors exchanged nods and whispers, clearly realizing the weight of what Liana had just done. She had not just revealed her ownership. She had shown she could take decisive action and enforce it. Corbin stepped back, his expression hardening. For the first time, he understood she was serious. He realized she was not bluffing. The control she had kept hidden for so long, the power she had quietly nurtured, was real. He could no longer intimidate her or dismiss her. Darian tried to speak again, but Liana stayed calm. She didn't raise her voice or argue. She let the documents speak for themselves. Every paper, every number, every proof reinforced her position. She was in control, and everyone in the room could see it. By the end of the night, the investors had started questioning Corbin directly, and the guests had shifted their attention to Liana. She stood firm, confident, and composed, knowing that her next steps would determine the company's future. She had prepared for this moment for years, and now nothing could stop her. For the first time, she felt completely in command of the situation. She could see the fear and surprise on their faces. Corbin and Darian no longer had the upper hand. The emergency shareholder meeting would be the next step, and Liana was ready. She had waited for this moment, and finally, she could act freely and decisively. The next morning, the shareholders gathered, waiting for the usual show from Corbin. They expected his theatrics, his confident speeches, and his attempts to charm them into ignoring problems. Liana entered quietly, Sylvan at her side. She carried carefully organized documents showing everything clearly. Proof of misused funds, unfair promotions, and hidden losses that no one had known about. The room went quiet as she placed the documents on the table. The shareholders leaned forward, reading quickly, their expressions changing from curiosity to shock. Liana spoke calmly, explaining how the financial stability of the company, which everyone had assumed was Corbin's doing, was actually the result of systems she had built and maintained for years. She explained how mismanagement had been covered up and how her efforts had kept the company afloat without anyone realizing it. Corbin tried to interrupt, his usual charm failing him completely. The shareholders did not listen to him this time. Liana had the evidence, and they could see the truth with their own eyes. The room shifted as murmurs of surprise and disbelief spread. Liana stayed composed, letting the facts speak for themselves. Once the shareholders had absorbed everything, Liana called for a vote. One by one, they raised their hands, agreeing to strip Corbin of his authority. It was clear to everyone that the company could no longer be led under his mismanagement. Corbin's face turned pale, and he sat down, realizing that no amount of charm or yelling would change the outcome. Liana felt a quiet satisfaction but did not gloat. She had prepared for this moment, and now it had come. The shareholders then confirmed her as interim CEO. She was in charge now. Every decision, every action, every step forward would be under her leadership. She could finally guide the company with fairness, structure, and care. Darian tried to protest, his voice rising as he tried to regain control, but the shareholders ignored him. They had seen the proof of his mismanagement and could not support him. The vote to remove him completely passed, and he realized there was nothing left for him to do. Liana had won. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also a sense of clarity. She knew what had to be done next. The company needed to recover from years of poor leadership, and she was ready to make the changes. She would restructure departments, reward hardworking employees, and correct the mistakes that had been hidden for so long. For the first time, she felt fully in control. No one could dismiss her work, ignore her efforts, or question her authority. The trust her grandfather had placed in her, and the patience she had maintained all these years, had finally paid off. Corbin and Darian had lost, and she was finally recognized for everything she had done. She looked around the room, at the shareholders who now respected her judgment and foresight, and felt a quiet sense of victory. This was only the beginning, but she knew she had taken the first, most important step in reclaiming the company and her life. Corbin could not accept what had happened. He tried to act calm at first, but soon his frustration showed. He came to Liana, his voice full of anger and false sadness, claiming she had destroyed the family. He tried to make her feel guilty, to question her decisions, to get her to back down. Liana looked at him without flinching. She remembered every year of being ignored, every moment of being abandoned, every harsh word and cruel action. She knew his guilt trips were nothing new. They were just another way he tried to control her. She had grown strong because of what she had endured. She would not let him manipulate her now. Meanwhile, Darian tried a different approach. He hired lawyers and filed a case, hoping to challenge her authority and take the company away. Liana had anticipated this. She calmly presented the evidence she had collected over the years: documents, contracts, emails, everything showing her legal ownership and his mismanagement. The case collapsed immediately. The lawyers on both sides were shocked at how thorough her records were. Darian had no chance. Corbin, desperate, tried to find support elsewhere. He reached out to old friends and allies in the business, hoping someone would stand with him. But most refused. They did not want to risk their reputations by backing someone who had been clearly exposed. Liana had shown her strength, and the truth had made it impossible for them to remain loyal to him. Corbin was losing control of everything he had once thought he owned. Through it all, Liana remained calm and focused. She did not raise her voice, she did not argue, and she did not let anger guide her actions. She knew her power came from facts, preparation, and patience. Emotional traps could not touch her. No pleading, no shouting, no accusations would make her step back. She had worked too long and too hard for this moment to let them intimidate her. She watched Corbin's frustration grow, realizing that he could no longer manipulate her or anyone else in the company. His attempts to regain control failed at every turn. Darian was powerless, and his father had no allies. The truth and her preparation had created an unshakable position for her. Liana felt a quiet satisfaction. She was finally free of the manipulation and cruelty that had shaped so many years of her life. She could move forward with the company, with her plans, and with her authority fully intact. She did not need revenge in the way Corbin expected. Her success, her control, and the recognition she had earned were the best answer to years of betrayal. For the first time, she felt fully in control, untouchable by guilt, lies, or intimidation. Corbin's collapse was complete, and she had stood firm. She had faced his worst tactics and remained unshaken. The company, her work, and her life were finally hers to lead. Once she was in control, Liana wasted no time. She began by looking at every department carefully, deciding what needed to change. Some departments were weak because of poor leadership, and she renamed and reorganized them to make them stronger. Executives who had been dishonest or careless were let go. She promoted workers who had been ignored or undervalued for years, recognizing their skills and loyalty. Slowly, the company started to feel different. Employees were cautious at first. They had worked under fear for so long, and change made them nervous. But Liana was calm, fair, and patient. She explained her plans clearly and treated everyone with respect. People began to trust her because they saw she cared about the company and the people who worked there. They realized she was not interested in power for herself alone. She also brought in Keaton Royce as her operations manager. Keaton had always admired her work quietly, even when she stayed in the shadows. She knew he was smart, reliable, and loyal, and she trusted him to help run the company smoothly. With Keaton's help, she could focus on big decisions while knowing daily operations were in good hands. Liana worked carefully to change the culture of the company. She encouraged teamwork, honesty, and respect. Employees were no longer afraid to speak up. Suggestions and ideas were welcomed, and mistakes were seen as opportunities to improve. Slowly, the fear that had dominated for years began to disappear, replaced by respect and motivation. She also used her intelligence to improve the company in ways no one had noticed before. She found small errors, fixed inefficiencies, and built stronger systems for the future. Every change she made showed her natural skill and insight. Employees began to see her as a leader, not just a figurehead. She did not shout or demand respect. She earned it quietly and steadily. Even the departments that had resisted her at first started to follow her example. They saw how effective her strategies were and how fair she treated everyone. The company began to feel alive again, and the people working there felt proud to be part of it. Liana's decisions were not impulsive. They were thoughtful and strategic, designed to make the company stronger and safer for everyone. Every day, Liana felt more confident in her role. The power she had quietly held for years was now in full effect, but she used it wisely. She had finally built a place where hard work was valued, honesty was rewarded, and fear no longer controlled the employees. She had taken what had been hers all along and was now shaping it into something better, something she could truly call her own. The company was changing, and so was she. Her intelligence, patience, and vision were visible in every department. For the first time, the work she had done in the shadows was recognized, and her leadership shone clearly. She had reclaimed not just the company, but the respect and recognition she deserved. Corbin came back suddenly, furious and demanding. He stormed into the company, shouting that he wanted his position back. His face was red, and his hands shook with anger. He threatened to smear her reputation, to tell lies and twist the truth. He thought he could scare her into giving up control. Liana stayed calm. She knew his threats meant nothing. She had all the evidence ready: documents, contracts, records of his mismanagement, proof of her ownership. Nothing he said could change the facts. She let him speak, listening carefully, without interrupting or showing fear. After he finished yelling, she asked him to meet privately. Corbin followed, thinking he could intimidate her alone. Once in the room, he tried his old tactics again. He called her useless, the same word he had used at the party, hoping to hurt her as he always had. Liana looked at him steadily. She remembered every time he had used words like that to control her. She had spent years waiting for this moment, and she was not about to let him manipulate her now. She calmly explained that she was done chasing his approval. She would no longer let his words or actions affect her. She did not need him to validate her or the work she had done. Corbin's face grew redder as he realized she was not afraid. He tried to argue, to shout, to force her to change her mind. But Liana had anticipated this. She held her ground, speaking with quiet confidence. She told him clearly that he was no longer welcome in the company. His threats and attempts to take control would not work. Finally, she made the decision official. She banned him permanently from the premises. He could not come back, could not interfere, and could not influence the company in any way. Liana had taken control, and she would not let anyone take it from her. As Corbin left, he realized he had lost completely. His anger and frustration were useless against the truth and the authority she had earned. He could threaten and yell, but the company and its employees now respected her leadership. She had the facts, the documents, and the support she needed to enforce her decisions. Liana felt a quiet sense of relief. The last attempt to undermine her was over. She no longer had to fear her father or his manipulation. The company was safe under her guidance, and she could focus on leading it with fairness, intelligence, and strategy. She looked around at her office, at the people who trusted her, and felt a calm satisfaction. Every action she had taken, every careful step she had planned for years, had brought her here. Corbin could no longer affect her or the company. She had faced his last attack, and she had won. From that day forward, the company and her life belonged entirely to her. She had closed the door on the past, on manipulation, and on fear. Everything she had worked for was secure, and she could finally move forward with confidence and clarity. Liana decided to hold a new anniversary event, but this one was very different. It was smaller, calmer, and focused on the employees rather than the showy celebrations her father liked. She wanted it to be meaningful, a way to show appreciation to the people who had worked hard for years without recognition. She stood before the employees and spoke clearly, explaining the new changes she had planned. She announced raises for those who had been overlooked and introduced new benefits that would make their work lives easier and more secure. She outlined her vision for a healthier, stronger future for the company, one built on fairness, respect, and teamwork. People listened carefully, some with wide eyes, some quietly smiling. They could see that her leadership was different. Sylvan stood nearby, quietly watching. After the speeches and announcements were over, he approached her. "You have honored your grandfather's faith perfectly," he said. Liana felt a quiet warmth in her chest. She had carried out his wishes, protected the company, and done it with care and strategy. She realized that the power she had held for so long was now being used to create something lasting and positive. For a moment, she reflected on her journey. She thought about her father, about the years of neglect and cruelty, and about all the ways he had tried to control her. But she understood something important. Her revenge had not been about humiliating him in public. It had been about surpassing him, proving to herself and everyone else that she could succeed on her own terms. She had taken the company, made it stronger, and led it with intelligence and fairness. That was her victory. Far away, Corbin watched the news of her success on a screen, alone and furious. He could see the changes she had made, the respect she now commanded, and the stability she had brought to the company. He realized he had been completely outmatched, and his anger could do nothing to reverse what had happened. Liana's careful planning and patience had defeated him without her ever needing to humiliate him directly. She turned back to her employees, seeing their trust and respect in their eyes. They were the real measure of her success. She had not just reclaimed a company, she had reclaimed a workplace, a culture, and a sense of purpose for everyone involved. Her decisions were already making a difference, and the future felt secure and promising. Finally, she walked into her office, taking a deep breath. It was hers now, every corner, every desk, every decision. She was the rightful CEO. The control she had quietly built and protected for so long was now fully realized. She had reclaimed her life, her work, and her respect. She felt calm, confident, and free. The past could no longer hold her back. Everything she had worked for, every careful step she had taken, had brought her here. Liana smiled quietly to herself, knowing she had truly won.